Welcome everyone. It's Craig Fisher, your intrepid journalist, host du jour, tech enthusiast, and recruiting aficionado. Here, joining me today are Will Crandle from Horsefly, Erika Oliver from Horsefly, and Scott Parish, who's the CEO of Hireguide. And we're going to talk today about skills-based hiring and leveraging skills-based strategies for unbiased and successful recruitment outcomes. So I'm going to start by saying it is lovely weather in North Texas right now. So we've got 77 degrees. The air quality is just okay. We've had some iffy air quality in North Texas the last few days. A lot of it's allergy season, let's just say that. But it's a big weekend here in the Metroplex. We have the University of Oklahoma versus the University of Texas. This is the Red River rivalry. That is a mouthful. This is a game that's been played for something like 100+ years at the Texas State Fair at the Cotton Bowl. And people from all over the country go to the Texas State Fair this weekend and enjoy some amazing football tradition. It's one of the top rivalries in all of college football. You never know. Throw the records out the window, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we play the game. Saturday, it's a big one at 2:30 Central Time. All right. So I'm going to start, Erika, with you. How's it going in your neck of the woods? What's happening?
It's great. In New England, weather has been surprisingly good for once, which is wild. No snow yet. Also want to give a shout out to that game you have going on. Of course, I have family from Tulsa, Craig, as you know. So, of course, I'm going to be supporting Oklahoma all day, every day. So my apologies to my Texas fans. So, but yeah, things are really, really good. In New England, one of the best things is the changing of the leaves. So we're starting to see that come to bear. So good stuff, not snowing yet.
So there's a meme about the changing of the leaves in Texas, and it is leaves, and then the next screen is no leaves. So that's the
Nice.
that's what we get here. It's great. Will, how's it going with you?
I'm fantastic here in Liverpool. Cracking on. Recently tore my patella tendon playing football at 45, which I wouldn't recommend. Being super productive, sat here on the couch, getting nice and fat.
Do you have a refrigerator with beer within reach?
No, you know I'm not a drinker, Craig, but I do have Diet Coke and lots of potato chips or whatever you call them in the US.
Yeah, so medicinal. That's all I was thinking.
That's it.
So Scott, how are you? This is your first time on with us. We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on in your world.
Glad to be here. I'm calling in from Santa Monica in California, and I've learned never to play the weather battle game with folks, so you just make enemies across the country. So right. I'm not going to talk about another sunny, perfect day out here, or the fact that there's no leaves changing, mostly just palm trees. Sorry, I'm really poking the bear there. I'm actually Canadian, and so I've spent many a winter, and I feel like I've earned a little bit of the good weather, and I actually very much miss the seasons and everything that you guys are talking about. So we're good. I'm ready to chat.
Well, you also have one of the best airports in the United States in Santa Monica. Can I just say?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say LAX, and then I thought you were being sarcastic. No. Yes, in Santa Monica, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Except if you live in that and you live in the neighborhood, then they love it a little less.
Yeah, so I live near DFW Airport, and you just get used to the sounds, right? I mean, it's just part of the air traffic is just part of the ambiance. It's great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do a brief overview of Horsefly real quick and Hireguide. So Scott, let's start with you. Tell us a
Sure.
little bit about Hireguide and what Hireguide brings to the table regarding skills-based hiring.
Yeah, so Hireguide is a complete interview system. It's an end-to-end solution that helps operationalize skills-based hiring on the recruitment side of the equation. And the reason that we built this is just there's a billion interviews happening every year, and they're slow, they're poorly predictive of performance, they don't treat candidates with the respect that they need. They're just rife for innovation. And so what we've seen is, applicant tracking systems are awesome, but they're really applicant tracking systems. They're not interview decision systems. They weren't sort of built with that mental model to really scale a very high quality process down the hiring funnel. So we really enrich all of those capabilities and bring everything that you would need to do, to really make the best hiring decision. So we're very focused on this idea of hiring decisions. And yeah, that's a little bit about us. We're run by 10 LinkedIn alumni. I've been building HR tech for a long time at LinkedIn, and we're just all really excited about the amount of innovation that's already here now, and the next few years are just going to be amazing in terms of the problems that we can solve. So
yeah, so I've played around with Hireguide a little bit, and it seems that it is amazing at helping teams create structured interviews in minutes that will, very much help with eliminating bias, being consistent, using the skills-based methodology. So, Erika, do you want to talk a little bit about Horsefly's angle here and what we are trying to relate to our audience today?
Yeah, like I'll kick off, and then Will, if you want to hop in and fill any gaps there too. But I think in this particular instance, where Horsefly really shines is the granularity of data that we can extract and provide based on the skills that we can enter into our platform. And there's so many different ways that can be used. So that's everything from looking for those wildcard profiles, for example. So it's like, let's say you're looking for, okay, I'm going to use something that's not quite right. Let's say you're looking for a profile and you've got limited budget, but they're core skills that you really need. We're able to provide a variety of insights from costing, location strategy, so on and so forth. And so that's one area that really comes to mind. Another area I think where I get really excited about the partnership capabilities between the Horsefly platform and some of the stuff that Hireguide does, it's really around focusing on like the what rather than a job title. And I think, Scott, we talked about this a little bit in our initial conversation where, in hiring the right person, the job title is not necessarily the thing that's going to make a successful hire. And I think anchoring around skills and AI-driven unbiased technologies just makes people do better hires faster. So, Will, did you want to fill anything that I missed there maybe?
No, I think you've captured a lot of it. I mean, I think the importance of hiring in today's market is that an account manager with SaaS is completely different to an account manager with pharma, and you need to understand that not only in your in the major markets but also globally, and that's what we do really well.
Yeah, I always say the job title is like a bundling. It's sort of like many different skills sort of wrapped up, and that bundling doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. And so when you move to the skills methodology, you can sort of unbundle that and talk about the difference between a SaaS manager in a sales manager in a SaaS context versus a pharma context, because the skills are primarily different.
Absolutely. One thing, if I could just hop in real quick on this, Craig, because I know it's something you and I are really both passionate about. When we think about inclusive hiring, I think about our veteran population, right? There are so many people who have managed platoons of hundreds. They have skill sets that are above and beyond what you would typically track to a job title or something like that. So I think one of the things that I love about our platform and your platform, Scott, is that that really captures the aptitude and the abilities of populations like our veteran populations that might be overlooked if we're just looking for apples to apples skills or the everyday interview assessment. So that was one other thing I wanted to hop in on that.
So I think this is always fascinating because I feel like the job title, I think tenure is overrated. I think right. I think there's lots of things that in today's job market that we can basically turn off. On a traditional resume that maybe shouldn't even matter. I think education very often is, we're biased towards certain types of education in a lot of roles where we needn't be. I mean, if someone has the skills, then they have the skills, and sometimes those skills are cultural skills, right? They're not exactly technical skills, and certainly the difference between a SaaS account rep and a pharma account rep are going to be wildly different. But patience is a thing that is going to be different in maybe those types of personalities, because while they're both relationship sales, one is certainly more transactional than the other. One might take 9 to 12 months for a deal to happen. And so sort of measuring all of those things and understanding the aptitude versus, the very specific things that you would traditionally require in a job description might have to be thrown out the window a little bit. So I like that Hireguide can help you structure an interview in a way that fits that specific job versus sort of a general purpose interview timeline and format. So there is a skills gap globally. I've been making these wonderful little labor market minute updates and following sort of what's happening with the sort of job scene in the US and the job scene globally, and the disparity between jobs and talent. So Will, do you want to talk a little bit about the current state of the global skills gap? Mute, man.
Be on mute.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think McKinsey, the World Economic Forum, have been reporting for years that there's, 87% of companies are going to report skill gaps expected in the next 5 years, and that should be 100, because the whole world is going to change soon. I mean, the fastest growing skills at the moment, if you look at it from a high level, are data analysis, AI, machine learning, and software development. And if you just think about those skills, it's really high level. And the crazy thing is that none of those skills mean anything without going a level deeper. So you think about software development, for example. Software development, about getting the best software developers at the minute, you've got to be thinking about things like Cursor and Copilot, which are the things that are enabling software developers to do much better things than what they can do with just Java, for example. And then you look at AI, the same, LangChain and Hugging Face, which is like these are the skills that you need to identify within these groups. So it's really interesting that there's so much granularity in these sectors now, and yeah, I think the impact's going to be massive. One of the tech firms we work with, They do an analysis to look at the emerging skill trends to allow them to know not only what they need to hire, but who they need to upskill within their org. So it's just really interesting where it's going.
It's interesting. I'm starting to add things like AI power user to job descriptions. And Scott, I know you're passionate about this subject.
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable thing? And Erika, I know you had a comment as well. So either of you can go first. I'm not going to choose.
Scott, you go first.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a reasonable thing, and I think once you understand your decision criteria by which you want to select somebody, which really should be a sort of collection of these skills, the next thing that's really difficult is actually like, how do I assess those skills and make sure that those are there? And a lot of the times these are new things, like what do I say? Like, what am I say about lang chain and Hugging Face? And like, what does it mean to be a power user? There's a lot of mental friction in trying to figure out what do I need to ask to actually assess this? And what happens today is that most TA teams sort of say to hiring managers, well, you guys are the pros here. Like, you just do it on your own. And this is a very heavy mental lift thing to go through a whole a skill like that to figure out good assessment criteria, not just figure out a good question, but what does a good answer look like? It's fine to just lob out what is lang chain, but how do I know the person who's really great at that versus this? And so for a long time, it's just been too hard to make these skills-based methodologies transfer nicely out back into the business. And so I am very excited about AI and the capabilities now. So for example, with Hireguide, we can do that. We can immediately say to you, we've learned your business context, as we mentioned earlier. Pharma is very different than this. So AI knows and has learned everything about your company. They've learned everything about that job title. They've learned everything about that skill that you want to evaluate around LangChain, and then can now suggest really good content for you, which can be, co-developed with the hiring manager and tweaked and evolved, but much easier. And so I think a lot of these, that's just one example, but there's dozens of these across the workflow where AI is going to enable, finally, the ability to bring these skills-based methodologies out into the business without overwhelming managers and having to do things that are just way too hard, because this can now happen in a minute. So I'm very excited about that.
So as it relates to the skills gap now, right, is it also reasonable to say either you are an AI power user or you're willing to learn, reskill, upskill, etc., right? I mean, because we're going to have to teach a lot of people. There's not very many people in my own office that have the skills that I do with, just writing queries. And so, I mean, everyone's going to have to be willing to learn that, but how do you assess the capability to absorb that sort of information and learn how to do that? I don't know. I'm going to be real curious.
I can talk about this all day. So you guys go, and I'll tell you how we would think about that.
Well, I'll just kick off because I could talk about the same thing too. Really, I mean, that is the tricky bit. Like what we're seeing in the industry, a lot of companies are trying to make the decision of, do I hire externally or do I invest in upskilling or reskilling my existing team? There are cost benefits to that, so on and so forth. I think it's one of the things that's powering this phenomenon. But the second thing, to your point, Craig, is the aptitude and the capability. AI-powered tools it's only as good as what you put in. And so I don't know the answer to that question. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Scott, because I think some people certainly just do have a limit. They can go to here, but in terms of really making AI be a powerful, impactful tool for them, not everybody has the chops to do that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
So a few things. I think one of the things that is a really good thing to look for in recruitment is something like learning acumen, because of its flexibility across many different skills. So the behavioral research on this shows that there are a few characteristics that are very powerful in predicting employee performance. One of them, for example, is learning acumen. And you can ask questions. You can tell people who are hungry to be absorbing these new kinds of capabilities. And that's a good predictor on whether they're going to be able to make the jump into the new skills. There are other ones as well, though. Conscientiousness as one of the sort of big 5 traits. And honestly, I think a lot of times people use a 4-year degree as a sort of judgment of conscientiousness. Like, could you pick something and stick to it? And, you had to go through all of the sort of hard parts to keep doing that. And if you stuck with it, it's kind of a mark of conscientiousness. Now, it's a very expensive and ridiculous mark, and there are much better ways to evaluate that. But I think those are examples of a couple of things that I think we would look at. And then what we very often see because we've done this with thousands of interviews, is that on that sort of scorecard, you're almost always missing a couple of those skills. And being able to have a conversation about it with the team on saying, okay, most of these pieces are in place. Are we comfortable with this particular one being something where we develop? But having a picture of a candidate that is rich like that, where they can show, they have strength in these areas and some not so good pieces in these areas, and then be able to sort of think about it holistically, is a picture that's hard to get today, but when you have that, can be very powerful. But I don't think it's like, does everybody tick every box? Because you just never get that.
Totally. We could do a whole session on the big 5 traits. I could go on that.
Nice.
All
Okay.
day.
Yeah.
All right. So those of you who aren't power users of AI right now, there is hope. All is not lost. I feel like this is just like learning Outlook, Word, Teams, PowerPoint, right? I mean, you do have to have that conscientious behavior, though, to see it through and to try to do better. And because it's not perfect for sure out of the gate. So none of these tools, in fact, let's just say broadly, software tools don't work if you don't actually use them well. So there we go. All right. And these are software tools. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the benefits of a skills-based approach and how AI can enhance the interview process. So I understand that we talk a lot about skills-based hiring, and it's sort of a well-bantied about term, but let's get real specific for a minute and talk about, what are the benefits of the hiring approach of the skills-based methodology. Who'd like to take on that?
I'm going to nominate Scott because I am watching his head.
Yeah,
passionately.
I'm real time assembling a sort of framework about this. But here's the top 3 things that just jump to my head. I mean, the first benefit very clearly is when you make decisions that are organized around skills in the context of evaluation, it's somewhere between 2 and 5 times more predictive of how that person is going to perform on the job, rather than organizing your assessment just strictly around their resume or a chronological exploration of their past experience. McKinsey has found this information. Meta-analytic studies of interviews, which are looked at 103 science studies of interviewing, have found that these methodologies are significantly better. So the first thing is more predictive. Now, if you're an organization that's doing 100 hires or something like that, that's a huge impact. Being able to, when you're bringing on a team, to be able to make that more predictive. So that's the first, I think, big slam dunk. The second is we're a benefit corporation, and we also really believe in fairness, and that interviews are the gateway to opportunity at work. and that gateway, we have a moral standard to do as good as we can in making that gateway fair for folks. I mean, there's probably nothing more important in your life as getting a job opportunity. Like, think about, you calling your family, and it's a big deal, and showing up to be interviewed is a big deal. You're really nervous about the whole process. So the second sort of unbusinessy benefit, but I think is a really important thing, is bringing fairness to that process. And when you use a structured skills-based methodology, the number one thing candidates look for in evaluating whether they were part of a good process was, did it feel fair? And so I think that's huge. We could also talk about the fact that EEOC complaints around compliance are up 70-something% in the last few years. And so organizations that can't say, we make decisions in a structured way, are opening themselves up to legal risk in a way where, if you can say, we have a thoughtful process around this, I'll show you how we make decisions. And it isn't just with our gut and a whole bunch of bias. Like, we actually go through this, protect you in a big way. So I think business benefit, slam dunk on more prediction. Social benefit, hiring kind, building up your brand amongst candidates, and honestly just meeting a sort of ethical standard of feeling good about what you've implemented. I think the fairness piece is what comes to mind. But there are honestly probably 5 to 10 other strong benefit. Actually, let me say one more. I'm sorry. Another huge one is being able to organize your unstructured data. So today what happens is data is all over the place in your organization. It's in conversations, it's in people's heads, it's in emails, it's in here, and you have no way of making sense of all of that. And so what happens when you use a skills-based methodology is you start to have a backbone by which to organize information and take unstructured data and transfer it into better hiring outcomes. And so, for example, people say, I couldn't possibly give a candidate feedback on my process, because I'd have to call that hiring manager and pull out all the unstructured data that's in their head and written on a piece of paper. Whereas when you use these methods, this is already organized for you, and you can start to enable candidate feedback in one click. You can start to go to the talent acquisition leader and say, hey, here's an organized way to think about what's happening in our business. So that's super powerful for bigger companies too.
Scott, it sounds like there might be a little AI involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI, that's what AI can do, but it needs a backbone to organize it. Like, for example, you can take an interview transcript, right, which is an hour, or the transcript of this conversation, and you can say, organize, like, give me some notes. That's loose, right? And you do that 1,000 times, you're going to have 1,000 transcripts that are loosely organized around notes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to start making sense of what happened across those 1,000 transcripts. A small shift is take that transcript and let's organize it around the skills. These were the skills that we were meant to be evaluating. And so now we have all sorts of information about 1,000 transcripts that are all organized around skills. And so AI is doing that for you. And then you can say to the system, across 6 months of my transcripts, let's talk about, is anyone talking about our culture? What kind of candidate questions are we? All of these things are now organized in a way around skills. That's just a small example.
So, and that takes some learning and direction, right? And Hireguide has done some of that, right? It doesn't occur naturally, right? You can get the structured data, but to what outcome, right? And so if you say, this is the outcome we're looking for, right? We want conversations that end up with people who can do these things, then it's a different skill set than just saying we want structured data.
Yes. I think that's the exciting thing. We're super close to being able to tie together the output variable, which is real performance on the job, mm-hmm. and close the loop on what are the kinds of conversations that actually predict that performance on the job better. That's complicated. I won't say that we've solved that problem right now, but we're putting all the building blocks in place. And I believe that within a year or two, you're going to see a major jolt in the predictive quality of assessments. Looking at those output variables, because it's all going to be tuned to the output variable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just want to say that my mind is also blown, Craig. I think as a former recruiter, the first thing that comes to mind is, when you think about talent intelligence, there's the data aspect of it, and then there's the human intelligence aspect that's gleaned by so many sourcers and so many recruiters. So being able to have a way to organize that unstructured data to identify trends in the marketplace, what's resonating with your top tier talent, what's not really hitting right with your, I could just go on and on about what you can do with that. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, those of us who, are immersed in AI models every day are finding more and more how, especially now that they are learning from your past conversations, that the reality is, Scott, I think you're right. Within a short amount of time, we'll be able to really dial that in, which is fantastic. And I think it does result in a less biased process, which is great. All right, so let's talk about some real world examples of how this has been put into action. I know that both Horsefly and Hireguide have, some specific use cases. So, Will, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most recent one we've had was within a global financial services company. So they wanted to identify the skill gaps within the organization, expand the talent pools that they're looking at. So, rather than just focusing on credentials, like job title, experience, university, they wanted to expand the sort of talent pool that they were looking for. So they went skill based. And like, to give you a better mind, that these absolutely align with Scott's points in that, around unconscious bias and recruitment. One of the biggest impact was there was a 40% increase in diverse hires. And that, bear in mind, that wasn't the goal, the initial objective of this exercise. It was literally, okay, let's look at this from a skill-based perspective. The other one was the big one that Scott spoke about as well. It improved job performance and employee retention. Once you onboarded, the people that they were hiring had the skills needed to feel at home as soon as they landed in the teams, because there wasn't much upskilling required, and they could fulfill their roles and be happier sort of team members straight away. And yeah, that was the 15% improvement in first year performance rating for new hires. So I think that's the benefits that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, Powell just asked a great question, which is, do we feel that, understanding skills should be used in workforce planning before moving it into assessment? So that's really interesting. Like, that's how we sort of connect with organizations like Horsefly and others with Hireguide, which is very focused on skills-based hiring in the context of selection and that piece of the equation. What we see from most customers is a journey that starts with workforce planning, and that the leaders of the organization make this shift from, I think about heads, to I think about skill inventories. And I'm starting to think about my workforce more holistically and in terms of that kind of intelligence. The sort of next stop for that becomes the idea of organizing, the sourcing around those. So let's take a job title and turn that into, a skill profile, and see, how some of that, and let's take a resume and turn that into a skill profile, and let's do more intelligent ways of doing sourcing and screening. So both of those actions, I think, are good sort of prerequisites or sort of entry points into the skills-based world. Then what we see is that people hit this sort of harder wall, where expanding that methodology out into interviewing or the selection base means that now it's not a small group of executives that need buy-in or a small group of recruiters that need buy-in. It's actually like a whole organization of hiring managers, and then even wider, understanding your basis of candidates. and engaging them in that is really challenging. And that's why, that's why Hireguide exists. That's what we can sort of bring to the table. But to answer your question directly, we do see this pattern of starting in sort of workforce development, moving into sourcing, and then it kind of coming into the next piece with what we do. That's what what we see from customers. And then, impact wise, yeah, I have lots of stories in that. I don't know if you want me to share one of those or
Yeah, please.
We can move to the next topic or.
No, go for it.
Go for it. All right. Impact wise, often what happens is with skills-based methodologies, it's best if there is a business case. So Josh Burson, talks about this, like it has to be rooted in like a real business value. So for example, we often work with organizations, and I'm thinking of one in specifically who was hiring a lot of salespeople, and 75% of those salespeople were not reaching their quota ramp on by month number 9, and there was very high attrition. And that is a huge impact to the organization's goals, right to the point where the board got involved and asked the CHRO, like, we need a strategy, a human capital strategy to deal with the fact that our sales hiring is bleeding attrition, which is expensive. And worse than that, we're not hitting our business goals. And so when there's a really firm business need like that, so we worked with that organization to say, what would world-class selection look like in the context of sales hiring? How would we, refine that system to make sure it's working? How could we be consistent on doing this, 100 times across 500 candidates across, 2,500 interviews, in making sure that those conversations. And when you do that kind of thing, we're partway through the process of sort of proving this out. We haven't had that full 9-month cycle to do that, but already the organization's super happy with the kind of outcomes of this. So I think the takeaway from that little rant is like start with a business need and then be able to create a use case for skills that directly helps a business leader. And that's the good way to get your foot in the door and get the momentum going, rather than sort of saying skills as an abstract concept.
Absolutely. Craig, it might be reading your mind right now, but Scott, what you just went through ties really well to a question that Javier posed around workforce planning and, should there be a shift from workforce planning to skills-based planning and build versus buy? We've had these build versus buy conversations for years. My first thought on this, and Craig, I'd love your perspective, and Will, just the whole team's perspective, is like I'm seeing in the industry from conferences and with our clients that there's more of a convergence between the workforce planning activities, the people analytics activities, TA and TI activities, to create a clear picture on what do we need, how many of the talent do we need, and when do we need it. So if you need a high volume of a certain kind of skill and you need it quickly, then the buy approach might make more sense. If you're thinking 5-year, like a 5-year run rate, and there's an emerging talent supply, then perhaps building makes the most sense. So it's a really great question, Javier. I think we could probably have a whole webcast really on that particular topic. But Will, what are your thoughts on that? I know you're seeing a lot of things in the industry, and Craig, what are you guys thinking about that?
Well, so I've been seeing this conversation come up a lot, right? And it's a lot of it goes back to sales and business development, but then also sometimes it's, it can be almost anything, but certainly there's some sort of assessment process that gets involved, right? I mean, you have to have a way to decide, all right, is this the type of person that's going to do well in this role or not? And then you have to decide, okay, for our short-term goals and our long-term success, do we need to hire really good generalists who have these qualities, or do we need to hire mercenaries, right? And so that's been it's telling, because now you can take all of this people data and hiring data that we've had for many years and organize it right, with the help of AI to say, okay, we've hired this type of person for this type of role, and then we've had these jumps within X amount of time in business, and over time we've gone like this with kind of this model, and you can say, which types of hires gave us the biggest impact, and how long did it last, and how did it impact the rest of the organization. We're not 100% there yet, right? Workforce planning is still, it's far from perfect, but we are so much closer to be able to do any of this than we were in previous years. Even 2 years ago, when these open AI models started to debut, it wasn't even close. But now it's just rapidly gotten so much better. And Will and Scott, I'm sure you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting looking back. We're doing this now, modeling out a retrospective look at labour market events historically and how they've had an impact on the market moving forward. And we're layering that into things that are happening today in terms of things like supply and demand, or the state of certain markets or government metrics. And we're understanding how they're impacting the market into the future. And then we're tracking how we're doing against the future projections that we made. So yeah, I think it gets really interesting. And I don't know whether, Scott, you've seen any of the sort of, ChatGPT's got this real-time API, which basically helps you have conversations like this and gives you the right keywords to say and the right answers to questions. Have you seen any of that impact the type of work that you're doing, which is loosely related to what we're talking about?
Sort of candidates using that as to answer these types of things. We do see a little bit of that. Not as much. It's sort of sensationalized, I think, a little bit. It's a little bit more common in an engineering context, not so surprising, because it actually takes a fair degree of sophistication to get, really hardcore with that. I think, our perspective is, one, the traditional sort of written methods of like a resume and a cover letter and those types of things where you state your various skills, that's shifting a little bit because you have to verify that. So skill verification is becoming important, which means interviewing is the best way that we have right now to do that. So in the relative balance of importance, we're sort of seeing a shift that way. I also think there's a big difference between someone who's going to say, I'm going to let AI polish my resume and maybe sort of make me look a little bit more like a marketer, and somebody who's coming into an interview using a technology that would make their eye contact look like it's looking at the camera, when off to the side, they're running a real-time program to hear an interviewer question and hit that's a whole other level of that actor. And I think the vast majority of people are not going to do that sort of thing. And I think you can say to people like, look, are you using any AI assist for this interview? We need you to confirm that you're not. If it's discovered that you are, that's ground for termination with cause. So, we take this really seriously, and integrity is a big part of our organization. And they're like, oh no, I'm not using an AI tool. And then you can move on with your process. It'll get more complicated later, but for right now, I don't think it's really, it's not something where I think we need a huge solution tomorrow.
Where I'm seeing, and one of the companies that I'm involved with at Connect is actively working on this, determining, what's generated by AI versus what's generated by a human, right? And very soon, if we don't kind of get on top of that, it will be impossible to know, right? It's going to be very tricky. But then the counter argument is, well, wouldn't everyone do this anyway? And what I think about that is that making us all lazier and dumber? I mean, right? Have we lost the ability to use a paper map and write a paper check and fax documents? And
what's a fax machine? I'm just kidding. I'm old enough to know what that is.
Carrying a paper boarding pass, and right? I mean, we're this is sort of the dumbing down of the world quickly. And I mean, in all of the in all of the conspiracies, that's AI's sole goal.
Yeah.
Is for us to be stupid sheep.
It's so
No
scary.
offense to sheep.
Sorry.
We talk about this a little bit internally because my co-founder Joel is a PhD in AI, and he's just not like a super fan of AI sometimes, or is more of a fan of the sort of smart applications of AI.
Mm-hmm.
What we've conversed, this is not the official talking point for Hireguide as a company, and this is like what we talk about in the background, is that what we think is AI. If you're sort of a below average at a particular task, like writing an email or doing something like that, AI can raise you up to a reasonably good average, very, very quickly at a very low cost. If you're very good at something, AI actually can't pass you at that piece of the craft, at least, today. And so, for many people, the application of AI, because that's so fast, gets really tempting to do that because it's so fast, but it kind of lowers the quality in some cases.
100%. Yeah.
To this kind of level. So it really becomes this interesting thing where you can get greater levels of efficiency in the business because it's so fast. But not a lot of people are talking about the consequences of some of the quality from the best performers. And if you really got to do something in a quality way, this is not a great way. However, if it's something's below quality, it can move it up, really quickly. So in interviewing, people will ask the same 5 cliched questions. The bar is so low in terms of what people will do. So it's a massive raising on a bar. However, versus a very sophisticated, process, it can lower the bar sometimes. You have to be smart on where you use it. And us as AI developers need to be ethical in the way that we offer tools to people. Don't offer donuts, because we know people will eat donuts because it's bad for them. So for example, you could fill out a candidate scorecard. Hiring managers are busy. They're I've got to evaluate this candidate scorecard. AI could just do that for you in one button. If AI starts filling out your candidate scorecard, what is the point of you being there in that interview in the first place? And suddenly your organization is handing over their talent strategy to a black box LLM. And that's not the behavior that we want to. It's probably illegal as well for AI to be making candidate evaluations, but it's there. And and I've seen it on the market, people are not careful about offering donuts in the way that AI is used. And suddenly it can have these unintended consequences. So I think for us as developers, we also have to think about where can it help you, and then when not to offer that ease, because we want that quality, we want that thinking.
Now I low-key want a donut. I'm gonna have to just say that first.
I just said donuts too many times here, yeah.
And then I'm kind of anchoring on what you really struck a chord, Craig, when you were talking about, is AI making us dumber, And that, again, could be a whole nother session. But I think about back in the days where soft skills, like critical thinking, and it was just something you just had in there. Now, when I think about soft skills, critical thinking is crucial. If you have critical thinking skills, then you can be a powerhouse leveraging AI tools. If you don't have critical thinking skills, then what you produce is going to be real mid and uninspiring. So it would be interesting to see what's the multiplier with leveraging AI with a higher degree of critical thinking skills versus someone who's more task driven and kind of basic outcome oriented.
So I think people who have lots of conversations on an ongoing basis are better sources of information most of the time than a large language model, right? Or a learning language model. And I think that what I find is when So there's plenty of context for ChatGPT to go out into the open web and find Craig Fisher's ideas, opinions, and tone of voice on things, right? But if I don't continue to have these conversations, then it gets very static and it gets very mid, as you said, Eric. I love that. It's mid, low drip.
We did it for our younger viewers.
Yeah,
That's right.
the mid.
All right. So I think we're at a place where we need to do some future predicting. What is the future of skills-based hiring? What is the future of reskilling and upskilling and skills demands? Thoughts, Will? I want you to start.
I think we spoke a little bit about it just then, but Erika nailed it with having that critical thinking capability. I was speaking to my chair, David, this morning about my daughter who's dyslexic, and she's fighting every moment of the day to do her homework and bits and pieces like that. And I'm looking at what she's learning and struggling with, and I'm like, this isn't going to be that hard to sort of do if you've got creativity, emotional intelligence, and that critical thinking when you're older. Like, even I think there's a big thing about that, soft skills, or whatever you call them, because my CFO, our CFO, is building his own AI model, and in our business, and he's just like, it's just amazing. And he's good at it because he's really intelligent, and he goes deep on things. So yeah, I think I'm not sure where this sort of lands in with skill-based stuff. I think I'm going into the future of the world rather than skill-based hiring. But I think the skills that we mentioned at the top of the call, that lay the foundations for being good at what you do.
Yeah. I'll piggyback. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, go for it.
I was going to piggyback off of Will, where I totally agree with what he's saying, and kind of where I see the future going with skills-based hiring. I can see it going in two directions. Craig, you're probably going to laugh at one of these. It's been a pendulum for a while, based on the research that I've done, what I've experienced myself. We kind of swing back and forth between skills and job titles and certain taxonomies. So I think it will continue to be a bit of a pendulum, just depending on how the world changes. I think the other thing what I see in the future is that, as long as the population is not growing at the same rate as it has in the past, or going down in some parts of the market, being able to either hire the right skills or train the right skills is going to be increasingly important with a tighter labor market, just because you have a lower number of humans. And so it's not really a fully descriptive answer of where things are going. I think it's going to still be here, but the supply side of the talent market, I think, is really going to inform where we go next. So that's my 50 cents.
Well, so I think that's important because our population is declining. So maybe that's okay. I don't know. Scott?
So I think a couple of things. I agree with the pendulum, and I think skills-based hiring as a mainstream methodology for organizations is waiting in the balance right now. It's a critical moment where there's interest in this, but as a community, we have got to have some bigger, clearer wins from a business perspective on how this methodology gets adopted. And I do believe that those wins are coming. And if they can materialize, I think it will push towards a world where more and more organizations are really thinking about it this way. However, if we stay in this sort of spot where, skills is too hard to implement, it's, how does those types of things, like, I think it could actually go the other way and sort of burn bright for a moment, and then, something else will come into its place. So I really hope that it goes that way. But I wouldn't say it's a dead cert that this is going to fully materialize. But I love the work that we're all doing to push it in that direction. And then on the global level, the half-life of skills, BCG has some amazing data on this, that it used to be you acquired skills, up in your education, and then you just cruised on those over your working life, and the half-life of skills, as they call it. And it's not like that. You get an education now, those skills that you acquire are decaying very quickly, such that you need to be continually thinking about that sort of upskilling motion as you go. And so that's a new reality that I don't think we've all fully wrapped our heads around, that it's not a world where I got a bunch of skills in early life and then I cruise. It's like constantly finding these moments to be upgrading. And that's, I think that's really cool personally, but is also a big mental shift.
And I just want to plug in the kind of like the employer mindset, just to take a page from both of you guys' philosophy. I think as long as employers remember that they're hiring humans and to hire kind, if we anchor our interviewing processes and our hiring processes around those, I think are important principles, because at the end of the day, if we remember we're hiring humans, hire kind, treat people well, sometimes even if they don't have all the skills, their performance will be through the roof. So I think if we just remember that, I hope that factors into what the future holds.
So here at Connect, we measure intentionality, right? And we think that's a good indicator of how long people will stay if they are responsive and intentional about their process. And I know that Hireguide does some of that as well. And I think that another thing we need to remember is, that pendulum is real. We're evolving, right? I mean, I had to learn to type on a typewriter in school. That was something we had to, that was a class we had to take. That doesn't exist anymore, really. I mean, that's, my kids type faster. That's right, exactly. And you can almost do it with your eyes, right? I mean, it's going to be VR soon, so it won't matter. But also, kids don't learn to write in cursive anymore. And, there are lots of things that are just outdated that we don't necessarily need. So it's not worse, it's just different. And upskilling, reskilling, skills-based everything is going to evolve. It's going to change with the times. Before 2008, we didn't really have a very smart phone. It just didn't really exist. And now we've got this sentient extension of ourselves attached to our bodies. And it's going to be implanted in our brains soon. So, we're going to have all the answers. And so we're going to have to be able to measure things like capacity and devotion, and those will be skills. So I think, Erika, your point about hiring kind and with understanding and with people who want to be in your organization is important to remember as well. So this has been fascinating. Any final comments, Scott, from you?
I just thank you, but honestly, to the audience and the people that are curious about this and that are showing up to learn about it and talk about it and figure it out together. I think that's pretty amazing. It's exciting to work on things that are on the real edge of what we're doing, and that's very much where we're at today. So yeah, just thanks, and I love this community, and really glad to connect with anyone here.
All right, Erika, Will, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks Scott, for having us, as always fun.
Scott, thank you for joining us on our little couch session that we do occasionally.
My pleasure.
You're welcome to come back anytime. And thanks to all of you who joined. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time. And
in a couple of weeks, actually.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe on Halloween, is that right?
Day before
Halloween.
So time to prep the kiddos. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Okay. So thanks everyone. Be safe, all you storm area people.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about you. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Great.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.